The heavens are telling of the glory of God. Look up and seek His wisdom from above.
This is the last video in this section on understanding words. So I'm going to have a PDF file in the description down below that'll summarize what we've discussed. In this video, we're going to talk about two additional rules for understanding words. The first of these two is that words should be understood by their literal meaning unless the context dictates otherwise. The reason for this is simple. Communication is usually of a literal nature, and the Bible is no exception. We must beware of making symbolic or figurative language the author's intention when it was not. This is typically done for the purpose of twisting God's word to fit our own preconceived ideas. That can also be reversed, and we'll talk about that later in the series. We'll actually talk about this in a great deal later on in our studies when we discuss the interpretation of Bible prophecy. It's interesting to find that the disciples were doing this in Mark 9, verses 9 and 10. They did this because they were unwilling to take Jesus at his word when he spoke of dying. In this case, they thought that rising from the dead couldn't be anything literal, and so they thought that he must be remaining forever, and so this is something figurative in nature. Well, the truth is they were wrong. A literal meaning is sometimes understood if we can determine what the people addressed understood. After all, the communication was made to them and they had the advantage of the full context of the statement. However, at the same time, as we just saw, the original hearers did not always understand. I've listed a number of passages at the bottom of the screen that illustrate this point. Now, if we aren't careful, we can easily draw our conclusions from the erroneous conclusions of the original hearers. We should make ourselves capable of applying the rules for understanding or recognizing figures of speech. There are rules for recognizing when a figure of speech is being used, and we'll go over those in several future videos. We need to be able to do this because language is not always literal. Now, our next rule should go without saying, but you'd be surprised. If the author explains his meaning, then that must be accepted over any other possibility. If we aren't going to believe an inspired author, then who can we trust? If the author did not know what he meant, then I certainly can't be expected to know any better. When Jesus told the disciples what a parable meant, then it means nothing else. The parable of the sower in Luke 8 is a good example of that. Another example, when the Gospels define what Jesus meant by the leaven of the Pharisees, that should settle the matter. Matthew 16, 6 through 12. There are texts that come out and tell us what is meant by a specific word. For example, in John 1:38, we have the word rabbi. Matthew 1:33, the word Emmanuel. In John 1:41, we have the word Messiah. John 1:42, we have Cephas. We should take these at face value and make no effort to embellish what God's word has already explained. Well, that's it for the rules we need for understanding words. As I said, I'll put a file down in the description that summarizes these in one place for you to work with. Take time to work with them, and they'll become second nature to you as you continue to study God's Word.